Reform had hoped to pick up another parliamentary seat in the by-election on Thursday in Caerphilly. In the end, Plaid Cymru won. Reform came second, but the result was devastating for Labour, the only party ever to have held that seat in the party's Welsh heartland. Conservatives were wiped out, just 2% of the vote. But I can speak now to Reform's head of policy, Zia Yusuf. Before we come to wider politics, Zia, how do you react to what we've just heard?
Well, I'm relieved that he has finally been rearrested, reapprehended. One can only consider how the victim and the victim's family must feel. I said yesterday on social media that the state of Britain's descent into a Monty Python sketch was almost complete. This is a man who, eyewitnesses said, was actively trying to go back into prison after being accidentally let go. So, look, glad he's been reapprehended. But, it's absolutely shocking. And how any victim of sexual assault can look at this Labour government, and Jess Phillips in particular, and the whole state apparatus right now and have any degree of confidence is beyond me.
Well, you pick out the safeguarding minister, Jess Phillips. Is it your case that she needs to go?
Absolutely, absolutely. True. How is it in any way tenable for her to remain in post when 5 survivors have resigned from the inquiry, expressly demanding that she go? For the sake of the survivors, for the sake of there being proper justice being done, and for truly no stone to be unturned, she has to go, yeah.
Well, of course, Reform is now, if you like, a proper political party. It is regarded, I think, and Prime Minister said it in terms, as the proper opposition. So you also can't just be commentators. You've got to think about what you would do if you were actually in government. How would you have prevented this happening? And indeed, you were against a one-in, one-out policy. Chap went and he boomeranged back. What would you have done about that?
Yeah, well, look, this is the one of an enormous catalogue of ridiculous failures, right? So he should never have been in the country in the first place. We've got to secure our borders. We've already talked about, we have a plan called Operation Restoring Justice, which will deport people who are in this country illegally, detain them and then deport them. That will create a deterrent, Trevor, so that people stop coming. Number 2, we end welfare and benefits for foreign nationals, such as people who are coming across the Channel illegally from France, which is obviously a safe country. Let's talk about our prison service. The Tories, in their 14 years, shipped in 6.5 million net new people, around 11 million gross, and left the country with just 411 net new prison places. We have a catastrophic shortage of prison places. We also need accountability, frankly, in the civil service. The governor of the prison in question here that let him out has been refusing to speak to MPs on a one-to-one basis. We have to have When was the last time you had a catastrophic failure of a civil servant that actually resulted in them being forced to resign? Instead, usually they get put into the House of Lords. So this is a catalogue of failures.
I don't think anybody's going to contest the analysis you made or the description you made, but you're now particularly on polling recently and just what you would regard as success in this latest by-election, as well as Runcorn and so on, in pole position, and people talk about Nigel Farage as the next Prime Minister. So you've got a responsibility to say what you would do. Mm-hmm. Now, you've told me what's wrong. Mm-hmm. What you haven't told me is how you would, for example, send people back. But the Tories and Labour have difficulties with this. What would you do differently to them to make sure that people get sent back where they came from and stay there?
There's a whole multitude of things, but let's start with the legislation, right? Until the UK leaves the ECHR, it will not have sovereignty, it will not have control over its borders. So that's the first thing. It's a necessary, albeit insufficient, precondition. The second thing is, we lay all of this out in our plan. Secondly, we must derogate from every international treaty that is currently being relied upon to prevent and frustrate deportation. That means
Refugee Convention,
the 1951 UN Refugee Convention, etc. This would be emergency legislation for Nigel's first term as Prime Minister to allow us to get those deportations done. Once people realise that as soon as you arrive in this country illegally, you have a 100% chance of being detained, you don't get to wander around, and a 100% chance of being deported from the country, Trevor. Human incentives mean they will stop coming.
Oh, because forgive me if I rush you along, but obviously we've got news to cover. The Caerphilly result, is it a lesson for you that when other parties gang up on you, you won't be able to win?
Well, clearly tactical voting was had some impact on that result. The first thing to say is it was an astonishing result. I mean, Reform with 36%, that is almost 3 times as many votes as the Tories and Labour combined. This was a seat that Labour have only ever won elections in since 1918, when the seat was first incepted in Parliament, and then the Senate ever since. We're very proud of that campaign. It is clear now that for the Senate elections next May, it is a straight-up battle between Plaid and between Reform. We're very confident that we can come out on top. But look, we've got to continue to make our case to the Welsh people.
All right. One of the issues for Reform, indeed all Nigel Farage-led parties, is not necessarily Mr Farage's behaviour or yours, but of some of the people who join you. Your colleague Sarah Poshin, the Reform MP for Runcorn, said yesterday, I'm quoting here, "It drives me mad seeing adverts full of black and Asian people." Now, she's apologised, but she clearly thought that. How did you feel when you heard that?
Well, I know Sarah very well. I was instrumental in her selection as a candidate, worked very hard to get her elected, and I'm extremely glad that I did. I consider her a close friend, and she's a great MP for Runcorn. She did say those words, and she has apologised, saying that it was a poorly phrased thing to say. But you've got to put that into context. The caller, a gentleman called Stuart, had called in, and I think he was rightfully upset about the massive underrepresentation of some groups in television advertising and significant overrepresentation of others, Trevor. And we have to be able to talk about some of these
But these were her
issues.
words.
These are statistics borne out by a Channel 4 study.
She went on to say people are switching off, but there are too many black and Asian people on telly. Is she turning off telly now?
No. If you listen, I encourage you to, anyone listening to this,
to
listen to the whole
telly?
thing. Of course not. I know Sarah extremely well. She's a lovely person. She's apologised rightly because it was poorly phrased, as she said. But as I said, Stuart, who called in about underrepresentation of some people on television and overrepresentation of others, I think is a very valid point we must be able to talk about.
All right. Zia Yusuf, thank you for your time this morning.